I think we'll start. You've been talking about the clash. Anything there that you want to touch base on? I kind of like doing it this way just so that I can follow up and answer questions on that material if there are any. Anyone really? How many of you can see an interface inside of yourself, which is where one part of you argues with the other part of you? Okay. All right. And it's helpful for you to know. It's just like in the group, you get one person arguing with another person, largely according to those core values, according to those passions. You do the same thing inside of yourself because you have rival passions inside of you fighting with one another. And if you're not careful, that develops into a level of self-hatred. And next thing you know, the self-hatred takes over, and the two quit fighting, and they're sitting there watching you hating on yourself. And that's when that'll take you into depression. That will take you into a lot of the other zones because you can only handle about so much self-hatred. For a while, self-hatred actually, this is going to sound crazy, okay? But for a while, self-hatred actually feels good because it feels like you're doing something to take charge of the situation. And the ego wants to feel like it's fixing things. It wants to feel like it's taking charge. So there's a period during which you're screaming at yourself that it feels like you're doing something productive. Now, the problem with that is 1 John 3, there are times when your heart condemns you when it shouldn't, and there are times when your heart excuses you when it shouldn't be excusing you. So there's times when that gut is not accurate, and in fact, your gut is going to come out of two places. It's going to come out of, number one, those core passions that I was just talking about. You know, if you're an influencer, okay, you're going to feel good when you're having positive influence on people. You're going to feel bad when people are blowing you off. So your gut is going to come out of those core passions, whatever they are that are in you. That's first of all. But your gut also comes out of your normals. After you have walked life through and you've been shaped over a period of time, what feels right to you becomes what is normal to you. Now, you also have times when what's normal to you is trampling all over your core passion. That happens a lot of times. You've got someone who is highly sensitive, caring person. But at some point, they're growing up in a highly dysfunctional situation, and so that sensitivity it's like you're inflamed every day and every hour. And so as a matter of self-survival, you start lashing out and being ugly and et cetera, and I'll hurt them before they hurt me. And so you kind of, even though you're a highly sensitive person, you literally shut down your relationships with people as a form of protectionism. And then after a while, that form of protectionism becomes your normal. And so now I've got an inner part that's screaming at me that you should be caring for me. And I've got a normal that's saying you can't dare care for anyone, because if you care for someone, it's going to blow you up like a piece of dynamite, so to speak. And you're not going to be able to handle it. So I've got two guts screaming at each other, except that one or the other is going to end up being the stronger of the two and win out. You can care about the wrong things. Again, you're going to, because of how you're brought up, you're going to, let me use the word rescuer. Rescuers, for the most part, they have some of the right tendencies of caring for other people, but they do it in a wrong way. Well, guess what? If you grow up in a family of rescuers, which happens, you grow up in a family of rescuers who are doing stuff in very unhealthy ways, what will feel right to you is to continue doing those same rescuing things in unhealthy ways. And you're sort of living out your passion, but you're doing it in an unhealthy way, but because of your past, it feels right to you. when you're looking at the gifts and you're looking at the core values, and I actually, even though I teach it in the gifts thing, I actually almost prefer to do core values because of what you asked. At some point, it's hard to know, okay, is this character, is this calling, is this from family? At some point, it can be real confusing. What's coming from where? But what you can figure out most of the time with a level of clarity is, I have this need to be an influencer. I have this attraction to people's emotions and soothing their emotions. I have this, and a lot of times, even if you can't nail down the gifts the way we teach them, you can identify the values, and a lot of times I can help you going, okay, I think this one comes down from family. I think this one's actually your calling. I think this one is actually your character gift. A lot of times I can help you with that. But frankly, I don't know that that's as important as you just knowing this stuff's there and they're competing with one another. And so then I get a stand-up, sit-down situation where I have to make a decision of, oh, this one needs to stand up and this one needs to sit down. Or, wait a minute, these two can cooperate with each other right now. Let's come up with a creative solution where they're cooperating. Actually, can I stop you just for a moment? Yeah. Okay. Just with those few phrases, and I don't want to overjump and try to hang on to where you are, but you're clearly a highly compassionate, caregiving kind of a person. I grew up in my home where my mom was beat on a lot. First off, thing that you know, if you're highly compassionate and you're growing up in that home, what are you likely to do in order to survive? Fight back would be one answer, but that's not that's not the most efficient answer. Walking on eggshells. I mean, that's as good an answer as any, where you try to be, I'm going to say, try to be the peacemaker. And so you try to be the peacemaker where you're really trying to work things. I heard a put on the blinders. So far, none of you have hit the one that I was going to go. They're all good answers, okay? But the place where I was going to go, the most likely thing that person will do is go into shutdown. They will go into some form where I either go into a hiding or I go into an emotional shutdown where I feel nothing or whatever. Anyway, number one, human will is amazing. So the fact that can you choose against your environment? And the answer is yes, or you would have no choice. I mean, you'd just be a product of your environment, and you'd be here, and I could be going, oh, I'm so sorry you grew up in this environment. No, we don't do that. Human will is amazing, and there is a power of choice, and you need to recognize that power of choice. So that's the first thing. Second thing that I will tell you is all things work by spiritual authority. In you, that compassion value is so high that guess what? You were not able to adjust to it as a normal. You weren't able to adjust to it in a way that it felt right. So the only thing you could do, which is what I jumped out there with both feet, and you validated it, the only thing you could do is go into shutdown. Yeah, that's exactly what I did. So you would go into shutdown, and then you would come back and you'd be tormented, and then you would go into shutdown. You never, because that value was so strong in you, you never accepted it as a normal, which again comes back to your will. The combination of the value being extremely high in you and your will being, I will not go there, you put those two things together and it creates a level of spiritual authority where you lived back and forth between depression, shutdown, torment, and then trying to re-engage and live life. And so your swing has been between those two things versus going into, a lot of times once people go into shutdown, they develop this hard exterior of I'm not going to be hurt again, and then they actually start lashing out and attacking. Let's talk about panic attacks. Again, I'm being highly technical today, but oh well. Panic attacks are basically in the fear spectrum. Okay? Fear, basically, both fear and faith are visualization. So when I'm visualizing positive stuff, you would have to say it's faith. Okay? Without faith, it is impossible to please God. If I'm not able to take a look at a future and see a better future, how can I take the steps that I need to take in order to move towards that future? So faith is about visualization. So somewhere along the line between, your depression and your hiding and all of that, now anxiety begins to develop. Well, what's anxiety? Anxiety is a visualization of what probably is happening next. So now I'm not only suffering, I'm anticipating future suffering. And guess what? In his case, the anticipation of future suffering was pretty doggone accurate. I mean, it was likely, and so then you're pairing the anxiety with a sense of powerlessness because he's over here. Now, the people who go into shutdown or go into bitterness or go into anger, that's what happens. Instead of they're having these shutdowns, and at some point, many times when people feel powerless, then they will turn to anger and lashing out to try to feel powerful. But in your case, your core values wouldn't allow you to do that. So what did you do? You went over into panic attacks because you were not willing, somewhere deep down inside of you, you were not willing to be that hard, angry person who was lashing out at people. So instead, you're sitting over here feeling absolutely powerless, visualizing bad stuff coming. Well, what's the end result of that? It's going to look like panic attacks. And so then I start going into panic attacks, and I'm continually frozen. Now, the will of God in this area would be for you to basically be able to hear God, get in touch with Him, and do you think God's going to leave you there in the middle of an ugly situation? And at some point, God's going to make a way of escape for you, and He's going to guide you. But a lot of times we're not willing to hear the voice of God, or we're not praying, or we're not attentive to God. And so next thing you know, we get into a bad situation, or we stay in a bad situation that God would not have wanted us to stay in. But if you understand what I've laid out, panic attacks, if I'm not going to go hard, I'm not going to go cold, I'm not going to go angry and destructive, really just about my only human alternative at that point is panic attacks. These things have a science to them that absolutely cooperates with who God created us to be. And at some point, once you figure out, oh, this is who I am, then you can start finding a pathway out of that place of being totally disabled and dysfunctional and in a zone where I'm just kind of helpless with my panic attacks. Because once you start believing that God will speak to you and He will guide you and you don't have to stay there and take a beating, wow. Now I can start visualizing a different future that is not just totally tearing me up with panic attacks. There's another thing, too, that one of the hardest conditions for kids is whiplash. If you have one parent that is harsh on discipline and one parent that is extremely lenient, that's one of the most difficult things to negotiate. Now, in your case, you chose one. And so it actually works, but it still creates a level of confusion and guilt in the child because of the differences and I got two normals screaming at each other and competing with each other. So again, that creates a level of confusion that you probably still struggle with today. You're kind of like, what's right, what's wrong, and your gut, becomes divided, and it's hard. What I'm talking about, and I'm just, again, bigger picture. anxiety is still in the fear family. And fear is basically vision of future pain. So as long as you are continually visualizing future pain, you're going to have levels of anxiety, and you may or may not even realize that's what you're doing. But until you're able to switch that over where you can start visualizing a way to walk out of that pain, you're going to have levels of anxiety. It's going to create a level of unrest to the body. And when that unrest to the body is going on, then you're trying to figure out how you're going to respond. Am I going to respond with anger? Am I going to respond with anxiety? And those two tend to be opposite each other because one, the anger is a power response and the anxiety is a passive freeze response. It's fight versus flight. And so, wow, I'm swinging over to the anger side. Oh, well, I'm swinging back over to the anxiety side. And in some cases, people swing back and forth between the two. And so, wow, I don't feel like feeling weak and feeling powerless. So then I'm going to go over the anger side. Well, I don't like the destruction that I just caused with the anger side. So then I swing back to the anxiety side. And so in some people, those two actually end up being almost opposing reactions. And again, it's own it and confess it. So at some point, one of the most powerful questions you can ever ask is, where's my spirit right now? And so at some point, it's like, whoa, God, I'm full of anxiety right now. You don't try to fix the problem yet. You just simply start with, God, I'm full of anxiety right now. I need your peace. And you slow that crazy thing down, and you don't even try to address the problem. You turn your the first thing you do is look at your own spirit. And you look at your own spirit and you say, look, until I get cleaned up, I cannot hear from God. There is no room for God. I couldn't hear the voice of God or get the direction or have a sense of healthy direction if I don't even have a chance, because God comes to those who make room for him. So as long as the anxiety level is extremely high, the only way God's going to get through is by screaming at you. If you understand what I'm saying. And God doesn't scream very often. If you look back at the times in your life when God spoke boldly and loudly, they're probably few and far between. And part of the reason for that, if God speaks boldly and loudly, to whom much is given, much is required. When he speaks boldly and loudly and you don't respond, because of his justice side, he has to bring a greater judgment. So it's mercy to you that God doesn't speak to you loudly very often. So when I'm in anxiety, I can't hear God. When I'm in anger, I can't hear God. And I'm just out here being stupid and doing stupid things. The first thing for me is just to, whoa, where's my spirit right now? I got to get cleaned up so that I can hear God, because once I hear God and I start drawing strength from God, that's my solution, not anxiety and not anger. Well, and you do, because in yours, you swing back and forth. You swing from anxiety to anger. And it's exactly what I described, and so it doesn't matter which one of the two you're in ADD, you don't have a non-ADD response. Well, your non-ADD response is what? It's owning it. Wow, I go from anger to anxiety, and anxiety to anger, and anger to anxiety, and anxiety back to anger.
I feel like I've been doing a pretty decent job of facing that here recently, more or less than I have before.
And again, the most powerful question is, where's my spirit? Oh, I'm in anxiety right now. And you just stop at that point and say, God, unless I'm able to connect with you, unless I'm able to drink in from you, unless I'm able to get something from you, there's no hope here. There is no hope here. At any rate, we go back and forth, and I say it over and over again, what will make you better is not, magically finding this healthy thing. It's drawing strength from God. It's drawing strength from godly people. And when I stop and go, hey, I'm in anxiety right now, just that ownership statement starts you in the right direction. What he read in Peter, casting all your worries and cares on God. I start here. The most powerful thing I can do is change my heart condition. My heart condition right now is anxiety. Until I deal with the anxiety, I can't make a good decision. I can't think clearly. Why? You think from inside of where you are. So as long as I'm in anxiety, I can't make good decisions. I can't. And I can't act in a powerful way, in a healthy way. Again, I'm going to do to him what I did to someone a few days ago. What word did he say over and over again? The word safe. So now you find out that what's extremely important to him is that word safe. So feeling safe is a huge value to you. And just by the number of times you repeated it within a few minutes of time tells me that you're going to end up making a lot of your decisions around that value of feeling safe. Which means you might go into an anger fit in order to take control of the situation in order to feel safe. You might go into hiding in order to hide from the stuff in order to feel safe. So the value that drives a lot of your stuff is the need to feel safe. Now, for you to begin to feel differently about that, somewhere along the line, you've got to get outside of where you are. You see from inside of where you are. So to do that, you've got to start to understand that the safest place you could ever be is inside of the will of God. When you start understanding that if I can get inside of the will of God, if I can get in touch with God, connect with God, hear from God, be led by God, that's the safest place I could be, now you have a tool to fight against this thing. You've got this invisible voice in here screaming at you, going, you have to get angry, you have to protect yourself in order to be safe. You need at least another voice in there to compete with that says, no, the safest place for me to be is inside of the will of God and the will of God for me. And then you're probably going to need somebody to help you translate for a while, because your normals, your reactions over a period of years have kind of hardened you into a direction to where this is what's normal. This is how I respond to stay safe. It's going to take you a while to start to develop a new normal, a new habit, a new pattern of, safest place for me is to be inside of the will of God, and this is what the will of God looks like. Now, that's a hard place to move, and in fact, that moves me into the topic I'd planned to talk about today, which is how do I move out of impulsive behavior into a place to where I'm actually doing the will of God. So in your case, you're going to have to start repeating, and you do that by you work your brain outside of the situation. When I'm outside of the situation, I begin to start visualizing different parts of my life. Okay, I potentially will face this kind of a thing. When I face this kind of a thing, here's how I'm going to react. And you basically do role plays. And you walk through those. You're a fear-based person. Okay? You're one of the people I'm doing this for. You're a fear-based person. And guess what fear-based people are really good at? They're really good at visualization. So you begin to do some role play visualizations where here's what happens, here is how I responded. Here's what's likely to happen again, here's how I'm going to respond. And you start walking that through, and you start walking through scenarios that are common in your life, and you begin to visualize this is what it would mean for me to stay inside of the will of God. So then after I visualize with you, after I visualize this is what it would mean for me to stay inside the will of God, then I've got to do one more step of visualization where I start walking myself through and talking myself through, because I know safety is a huge value for me. I start walking myself and talking myself through of, okay, this is the safest outcome I can have. In other words, you relate your visual role play back to your core values in a way that you talk yourself through that this actually, in the long run, this actually does more for my core value than any other thing that I can do. See, otherwise you probably you can't wrap yourself around that. If you go back to other person who spoke, I won't say a name, okay? But the idea how relationship compassion is so huge. Somewhere in the end, you've got to do this role play and visualization and walk it through to understand that I cannot have a life that's going to be free of conflict and ugliness. Can't do it. But somewhere in there, you walk that through to understand that the most comfortable, healthy, connected life I can have will be inside of the will of God. And when I'm able to start walking myself through that, heart change comes through heart choice, I eventually get to a point to where I start embracing the will of God for my life, even though I have to walk through a level of pain to get there. But it's a complex process. It's not a simple, well, I'm going to follow Jesus process. Somewhere in there, it's helpful to recognize, here's my core value. Here's what drives me. All right, here's my responses. That's never safe. So maybe I need to come up with an alternative that is safe. Oh, maybe the safest thing I can do is to walk in the will of God. Oh, when I walk in the will of God, this is going to happen that doesn't feel safe. But you play the tape and you look at the bigger picture and you go, this is the best alternative I have. I'll still have pain, but in the midst of my pain, I get the comfort of God. I get the protection of God. I get the love of God, which will empower me to walk through that. It'll bring health and life to the situation. And if I bring health and life to the situation, I'm doing the most powerful thing I can do. And you need a third alternative. The third alternative is, first of all, what if God touches me? Because when God touches you, everything changes. So it's not the situation. It starts with, what if God touches me? What if God was able to give me a peace? What if God was able to give me a better reaction there? And then the second part of that is, what if God intervenes in the entire situation? See, that's a completely new alternative that you're introducing into the picture that hasn't been there before.
Well, when you're cast out in 100 different orations, how are you supposed to have room for God?
No, you can't. And that's why I'm saying you have to understand, and this is what most of us do. Most of us go from heads to tails. We go from fear to anger. And anger to fear, and anger to fear, and fear and anger to fear. Okay, there is no God alternative anywhere in the middle of those. And the God alternative starts with, what would happen if God touched me? You see, what you have to understand, people are spiritual perceivers. They are spiritual responders. You're going to look at your words and say, well, I was justified in what I said. Okay, good. You can just go ahead and feel justified. People are not responding to their words. They're responding to your spirit. So if I'm bouncing back and forth from fear to anger, guess how people are going to respond to me?
Kind of abrasive.
If I step out of the fear and the anger and it comes into the situation and I'm responding with a peace, now how are people going to respond to me?
Positively.
The most powerful thing you can do is own your stuff and get off from that fear-anger cycle.
Well, that's why I learned like, I'm not living yesterday. I'm not living tomorrow. I'm alive right now. And that's what I need to focus on is today, what I can do within this 24-hour period of time what God can do in my life, and just taking that all in. There's no sense in worrying about the rest of it.
Again, I said it a little bit ago, but I'm going to repeat it because I haven't used this one probably for months. When you change, everything changes. People are spiritual perceivers. You're going through in your brain what you said and how you said it. They are responding according to their own filter. When you get the peace of God on board, everything changes. Not for everyone. Some people will still see you exactly according to who you were and what you used to be. And it will take a period of time for that to break down. So take a deep breath. Don't get over it. It's not changing immediately. But the most powerful thing you can do is to get the presence of God on board to where your responses are different consistently over a period of time. When they are, you will get different outcomes. Maybe there's a handful of people that don't forgive you, and it doesn't change for that handful. But I tell you what, the vast majority of the people will notice the change, and it will change everything.
In my life, with the fear and anger thing, I've noticed that anger is the third step in a process for me. And anger allows my fear to be productive, because when I'm scared about something, I'm just like, I lock up.
Okay.
And so
if I could, let me stop for just a moment. That is actually one of the positive outcomes of anger. Anger is basically, in its pure sense, is a power response to where I actually act. And if my anger is motivating me to act in God ways that are powerful, that's actually positive. So,
and I'm glad you pointed that out to me, because my picture of that was more of a negative. But so anger allows my fear to be productive. But what happens before fear, and as a man, I'm only strictly talking as a man at this point. Before fear, with me, normally comes a feeling of weakness, because when I feel weak, something has happened. I can't accomplish something. Something's happened to make me feel inadequate. So I feel weak. But, as a man, you can't feel weak. Your natural man's wanting to tell you you're not weak. You can't be weak, So then when you don't know what to do with it, you become scared, or I become scared. So then after I become scared, I'm locked up, and I'm like, I have to conquer this, because the world can't view me as weak, and I can't view myself as weak. So I have to do something to make myself feel strong, or to make the world view me as strong. So then naturally I just lash out in anger. And then that, like I said, that gives productivity to my fear. It's kind of, I hope I explained that as simple as I could. It's a process. If you look at yourself and you feel like you failed, and now at this point in my life, I know this, so I look for it. When I feel I failed in a certain area of my life, I'm like, ooh, okay, anger is going to be coming soon, because I know that I'm going to feel scared, and then I know the anger is going to come after that.
Okay, now I'm going to ask the same question, see if you noticed. How many of you noticed a deep value that just came out there? No, weakness.
Yeah. That's why
If you heard him, I can't be seen as weak. Okay, so we have a compassion person. Look at the responses that come out of the compassion person. We have a safety person. Look at the responses that come out of the safety person. Then we have a strength person. Look at, not weakness. Look at the responses there. So it's like when he starts to feel like he's seen as weak. See, anger has two things. Number one, it's passion motivating response. But secondly, it's also a power gift. It's also a, you know what, we're going to take authority here. We're not going to be run over. And the strength of right and doing right is, in a positive sense, righteousness should not yield to wickedness. So there is a time for the exercise of strength. So he has in him that need. So when he starts to feel like he's showing up as weak, guess what? Everything kicks in and he takes off. Your core value will absolutely, and we've seen it with the 3 different ones here, will absolutely dominate your responses in terms of what feels right and what feels wrong. And the problem with that is then you go into unhealthy responses coming out of your core value. Well, it's been fun this morning because I feel like I've been able to translate to you in a practical way some of how these principles work. And really, once you understand the spiritual man, they're not that difficult. They're not that complex. It really, you take the core value, which is what's going to dominate you in terms of your responses, and you're going to do a heads response or a tails response. You're going to do a fear response. You're going to do an anger response. You're going to go these different directions. Ultimately, if you change, everything changes. So if when I'm feeling unsafe, I'm able to say, God, I'm feeling unsafe right now. I need to get that surrendered to you. I need to feel your sense of protection. I need to feel your sense of covering. And you get your spirit moved from a place of feeling unsafe to a place where you feel the covering and protection of God. You think from inside of where you are. Once I begin to feel that presence, my thoughts actually become, are you ready for it, more reliable. Anytime your spirit is in a bad place, you absolutely know your thoughts are unreliable. When I'm in my power zone, non-weakness zone, whatever, my thoughts are unreliable. They're just, I can't, you need to look yourself in the mirror and say out loud, I cannot trust anything I'm thinking right now. I cannot trust anything I'm feeling right now. When you're in your strength zone, your power zone, your waging war, having to win zone. When basically, yeah, as a power person, he will not say, you're not reliable. He'll look in the mirror and go, you're a liar right now. Because he has to do it with power or he can't respect himself. Okay, now the comfort guy, the compassion guy is going to go, you're just not, you're not quite totally reliable right now, okay? So, I mean, he's going to have to talk to him. This is crazy, but I'm serious. He's going to have to talk to himself differently than you talk to yourself. You're almost going to have to scream at yourself. You jerk! Shut up! You don't know what you're talking about right now.
So sin, if you hear something weird going on in the back, that's you. All right.
Oh, there's Kenny again.
So that's how he has to talk to himself. Now, the safe guy and the compassion guy, if they talk to themselves like that, it would go into self-hatred so quick that it would just totally destroy them. So for you to do self-talk, it is going to be much more okay, now, you know you're not reliable. You know you're not in a good place right now. So let's take a deep breath. God, I need you. I need your strengthening. Do you get what I'm talking about? Everybody needs different tools according to who you are. And again, what we tend to do, we try to teach a one-size-fits-all mentality, and it doesn't work. I mean, if the one-size-fits-all happens to fit your size, wow, this is good, but then we turn around and try to make everybody else fit our tools, and it doesn't work. So as you come to understand this stuff, it's really powerful stuff. What you're saying to yourself in the mirror is basically this: stop digging. Yeah. If you find yourself in a hole, how about step number 1, we stop digging? Yeah. So basically you're telling yourself, stop digging. Yeah. Look to God. Drink in from God. Wait upon him. Allow him to touch you and change you to get your spirit into a different place, because if your spirit gets into a different place, your brain actually returns. You can actually think thoughts that might be helpful. But when you're busy digging your hole, Your brain is not reliable. It cannot think good thoughts. And the people, you always know the people who are in the worst spots because they're defending their thoughts. Well, you don't know me. Well, you can't understand me. Well, who do you think you are to talk to me? Okay, you're in that place of self-defense. As soon as you're in that place of self-defense, where are you spiritually? And are you reliable? And the answer is spiritually you're in a bad place. And number two, you're not reliable. And so the whole time you're sitting there defending yourself, you're basically accusing yourself. You just don't know it. Those of you who have been here longer, you know exactly what I'm talking about because you've seen it. And so the most powerful thing, when I change, my situation changes. How do I change? I drink in from God. So I stop digging.
What happens if you're task-oriented and you're in the middle of digging a hole?
You stop. You stop. You stop. Anyway, we're over time as usual with me, so we need to stop. So, Father, again, I'm just amazed. I'm amazed at what you do, what you speak, how you guide. Lord, we would ask that this stuff could be used to your glory, to touch lives, to change lives. And I give you thanks. I give you thanks for the work that you're doing and the people you're setting free. And I praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.